another issue here with the fact that we don't have exactly the intent of what's happening here when we read it in English. And again, as I mentioned, and I'll continue to mention, it is not because of the poverty of the English language, but because, unfortunately, those who know Greek very well don't know English very well, so they don't really have a command of the language. Every language has its own intricacies and has a richness to it. There are things in English that don't translate well in Greek. And there are things when I was in Germany that didn't translate well back to English. And so each language has its own intricacies, and this is the reason why we need to preserve what is the original language. And again, in today's gospel reading, we have this, and some things that we may have missed. So it begins with what? Διδάσκων ο Ιησούς εν μια το συναγωγήν. So he's teaching now in a synagogue. So the gospel begins now with what Jesus, one of the things that Jesus did. Jesus certainly came for our salvation, but he came also to teach, and he taught in a synagogue. And then immediately then, it says, and there was a woman there who had a spirit of infirmity. So the woman is in the synagogue. She is listening, we can make the assumption, she is listening to the words of Christ. All right? She's not asking anything. This is not like the widow that comes, have mercy on my son. This is not like the centurion who says, I have my son at home. Can you help him? Nobody is asking for anything here. The woman is just there. That's all that it says. It goes on and it says now, Jesus saw her and says to her, what? You are freed. Okay, the term that they use here is apolelise. So, liso, he loosed her from now this bond that she had. And so now what's this bond? It says that she could not fully straighten herself. And the word that is used here in Greek is a verb of kypto, to be hunched over. But this is not, it's prefaced by the prefix sin, all together. Sin kyptosa. So she is not just bent over, but the sin in the front typically goes with like synagogin, a gathering. We go up together. Sin means together. So it's not just she's bent over, but all of her now is bent over her. This is an all-encompassing disease. This is not just osteoporosis. This is something even more than that. So we don't get a sense of the pain that she has been suffering for 18 years. And then immediately he says, woman, you are freed from your infirmity. So he has loosed her, but she hasn't asked for anything. So this is an instant now where we have Jesus now performing a miracle or a healing without anybody asking for something. And we know now that she was worshiping because it says, and immediately she was made straight, and what? Edoxazete to theon. She immediately then worshiped God. So she was there in the synagogue worshiping, asking for nothing, and Jesus now gives this to her. And it's interesting because it says, and immediately she was made straight. Now, usually in the gospel, if they are talking about something immediately happening, they use the term ευθύς for an immediate action. Ευθύς το ύπαρξε, something happened right away. That's not the word that they use here. The word that they use here now is paraχρima. So the first part of that, para, is just, again, a prefix of a word that means to be beside, or to be from, or to be around. All right? And then we have then the second part of that, which is chrima. Kreosi, something that is required, something that is obligated. When you put these two together now, you don't necessarily have an immediate action. You do have an immediate action, but you have an immediate action now meant to cover all of this synkiptusa which she had. So this is an entire healing. This is a total wellness of what it is that she had. She just didn't stand up straight, but she was cured of all of this infirmity which she was bound to. And then the last part here, immediately the rulers of the synagogue were indignant because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath. And they said to the people, and what we don't see is we don't pick up sometimes what's happening here. Who was it that did the healing? It was Jesus. Did the woman go up to him and say, I'd like to be healed, even though it's the Sabbath and I know I'm not supposed to be healed? No, this is not what happened. She was there and Jesus performed the healing. What the Pharisees should have done is said, who are you, Jesus, whoever you are, to come in here in our synagogue and break our law of healing on the Sabbath and heal this woman who didn't even ask to be healed? What business is it of yours? Out of cowardice now, they don't point to Jesus. They talk to the people and they say, and probably looking at the woman also, and they say, there are 6 days on which work ought to be done. Come on those days and be healed and not on the Sabbath day. The woman didn't ask for this, but the Pharisees, out of their cowardice, pointed now to the people, and that's why Jesus answers in this, again, this very hard way. Just like we had in the last gospel, we have to understand why Jesus behaves the way that he does. Because he calls them out and he says, you are hypocrites. So he's calling them out just because of the Sabbath, but because they don't have the courage to place the blame where it belongs. Jesus is the one that did the healing, and this is now why he uses that harsh term of hypocrites, and then speaks to them in their own Judaic language, I mean the language of the law, and says, she can be healed. Which one is more important, to obey the rules and the regulations, or now that we heal one another? And what we should take away from that is that as the Orthodox Church, we are not a faith that is tied to rules and regulations. We have canons in the church, but those canons and the church's discipline is always applied from a compassion standpoint first, and then now what are those rules? So unfortunately, many times we as Orthodox tend to forget that. We get all caught up in the fact that we're the church that has the fullness. We're the church now that was the original church. All of those things are true. But we can take our tradition and turn it into a museum so that when we do things, we don't do them out of an understanding and a compassion and a love. We do it because it's the rule. And the rule says, this is how you will, and put anything in there that you want. This is who can't be baptized. This is who can't be married. This is who is fasting wrong. We have to be very careful about our application of rules and regulations. And the Orthodox Church has always applied rules, firstly from compassion and regard to humanity, to our fellow man. And that's one, besides what the other things we talked about in here, that's the takeaway from this, is what Jesus was saying. You who are applying rules are the hypocrites, because you don't love what is true and what is human. You love what is ancient and tradition and custom. So you have to be very careful of that.